Along with the shock of the reveal of Gen 9 on Pokemon Day when the Pokemon Company announced Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet, also came the reveal of these games' starter Pokemon, Sprigatito, Fuecoco, and Quaxly. Not much is known about the game at this point, but we do know that these three are going to be the three starters that we get to choose from in this game. And obviously, a big part of that choice has to do with what these starters will ultimately evolve into, which is why in today's video, I'm gonna see if I can't predict what the evolutions of these Pokemon might be like and what their typings could possibly be as well. Ultimately, this is all in good fun, and with the very limited amount of information we have right now, there's a very good chance I could be wrong, but I do have some interesting ideas anyway, so without further ado, let's check it out. Okay, so we're gonna start off with the grass starter of these games, Sprigatito. But before we actually get into Sprigatito itself, I do want to point out that the typings of these Pokemon's evolutions are pretty likely to be dual typings, at least for one or two of them, if not all three. I say this because in Generation 8, all of the starters were monotyped, and I don't exactly think that Game Freak is going to go that route 2 times in a row, so I think it's pretty likely that at least one of these starters, if not 2 or all 3, will gain a secondary typing, which makes the prospect of their evolutions and predicting them a lot more fun. When it comes to Sprigatito though, I feel pretty good about what typing I think its evolution could ultimately gain, and that is the Fairy type, making its final evolution possibly Grass Fairy. I say this because of the 3 starters, Sprigatito is definitely the most feminine looking, and feminine traits often go hand in hand with the Fairy type. And when you look at Sprigatito in general, it just feels like it and its evolutions could pair with the Fairy type very, very well. So this is a prediction that I actually feel pretty good about. Since it itself also appears somewhat feminine in its first stage, I imagine that as it evolves, it will only grow more and more feminine as well, similar to how Popplio did with its evolutions in Pokemon Sun and Moon, who also coincidentally gained the Fairy type. I also can't predict this with any degree of certainty, but I am praying to Arceus that this thing can stay on all 4 legs, because we've had too many bipedal starter Pokemon that have no business being bipedal, and it would just be really cool to have a 4-legged cat starter Pokemon. I think that would be really nice. So that is what I'm hoping for, but what I'm predicting for Sprigatito's evolution is a Grass Fairy typing that's also a little more feminine. However, I do want to throw in some backup options as well, because I could see Psychic type as a possibility here, and obviously, even though it wouldn't be the most exciting thing in the world, Mono Grass. Now we move on to the fire starter of these games, Fuecoco, and Fuecoco is my personal pick of the 3 at this point because, I mean, just look at him. When it comes to trying to predict what it could evolve into though, it's a little trickier than Sprigatito was, because the thing with Fuecoco is that it's not actually really a part of that whole Chinese zodiac thing that's been going on since the very beginning for the fire starters, as it's based on a crocodile which doesn't really match up with any of the members of the Chinese zodiac. However, given that it is a crocodile, which is a reptile, it could reasonably evolve into a snake, therefore tying it in with the zodiac. And while I don't necessarily know if that actually will happen, or if I necessarily want it to either, because I kind of like the idea that it's broken the mold in that respect, it is a possibility, so it could be something to look out for. When it comes to its typing though, it's kind of a little all over the place, because there have been a lot of people that have been suggesting the dragon type given its crocodilian, reptilian-like appearance, and while that does fit from an appearance standpoint, putting the dragon type on a starter Pokemon is always going to be a bit of a reach, I think. I don't think it's impossible, it could happen, but it is definitely going to always be a reach until the day it actually happens, so I don't necessarily know that I would put it as my first pick. Since it is a fire starter though, the fighting type is obviously always an option, and frankly I think it would just be hilarious at this point, so I wouldn't mind it, but it's not what I necessarily think is super likely either. If I had to single out one or two types though that I think are the most likely for this Pokemon's evolutions, I would say either the ground or rock type, or possibly the fairy type as well, but that one would be a secondary choice because obviously I do like the fairy type for Sprigatito a little bit better. The reason why I am thinking these typings though for an evolution of Fuecoco has to do with its possible inspirations. Obviously we've covered the whole crocodile thing, but obviously it's taking the form of something else too. A lot of people have suggested that it looks like a chili pepper, which would explain the fire type quite well, but additionally I've also seen some people say that it could be factoring in a cocoa bean into its design as well. If you look at a picture of a cocoa bean pod, it does have the same general coloration and shape as well as the stem on the top of its head, just like Fuecoco does. There's also the fact that its name, Fuecoco, which does reference crocodiles, could also reference cocoa beans in a nice 2-for-1 combination. This could even be consistent with one of its international names as well, as its French name, Chochodile, comes from the word crocodile as well as a word meaning hot, but could also come from the word chocolate, even in the French language. And the thing that really seals the deal for me on this, not as like a guarantee or anything, but as a possibility, is the fact that there is a treat out there, a confection if you will, that is known as the Chocodile, which would be the perfect chef's kiss, cherry on top type of extra layer into its design if it is indeed factoring in cocoa beans and chocolate into its inspiration. And this doesn't even have to be in place of the whole chili pepper idea either, because it does resemble a chili pepper just as it resembles a cocoa bean pod. So honestly, it could be both for both of its inspirations and both of its typings. The typings are where it gets kinda tricky though, because I say ground and rock really only because of the brown color that is associated with these types, and that's kind of a stretch if you're factoring in chocolate as a possible inspiration, which is also why I said fairy, because chocolate is a treat, it's a snack, it's sweet, which goes good with the fairy typing. However, if Fuecoco did become a fairy type, that would obviously mean something else for Sprigatito, but since we don't know what any of these are ultimately going to evolve into, I think it's as much of a possibility as anything. And finally, we have the Donald Duck Boy himself, Quaxly. Quaxly is interesting because unlike Fuecoco, it seems like we might actually be able to tell the direction that its evolutions are going to take just based on its design alone. The most defining feature of this Pokemon would be its hat, or rather its feathers that are supposed to look like a hat, on the top of its head. This is obviously a central feature of its design from a visual perspective, but it also factors into one of its international names as well, as its French name, Coiffetin, comes from the words coif or coiffure, which can refer to a hairstyle and even a specific type of headwear. And because of all of this, there's been some discussion that Quaxly as a water type could possibly evolve into a sailor or even a pirate-inspired Pokemon. And I think that especially when comparing its little headpiece to some older naval sailor hats, that the resemblance really starts to become apparent. So I do kind of feel like that Quaxly could eventually evolve into a Pokemon that is also partially based on a sailor. Whether it did become a sailor or even a pirate though, I think its secondary typing could be just the same either way. And first and foremost, I think it could gain the fighting type as a result of this inspiration. Obviously, sailors and pirates are known for being a little rougher around the edges, so a fighting type would fit perfectly here if this is indeed the kind of inspiration that Quaxly is going for. And like I said, that would be my primary prediction for its typing, but I've also got a couple of backup options as well, including water flying, because it's obviously a bird, so it could gain the flying type at any time, steel, because the steel type could also go well with the whole sailor inspiration with the ships and whatnot, and finally, if it went the pirate route, I think dark type could potentially be a good fit too. If Quaxly did indeed end up with any of these secondary types and or a sailor/pirate motif, would you be happy with it? Be sure to let me know down in the comments below, as well as what you think of my predictions for the other two starters too. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more Pokemon content as well, including plenty more Pokemon Scarlet and Violet content in the months to come. Be sure to let me know your own predictions for these Pokemon's evolutions as well, and let me know who you are currently going to pick for your adventure in the game. With that said, I will be back with another video very soon, so until then, as always, thank you guys so much for watching this one. I love you very much, and I will smell you guys later.